Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 5th of September. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, no matter what part of Alaska you're watching from tonight. Welcome, and be sure to jot down this number, 1-800-472-0391. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. Keep it handy, and also write down the numbers that you use to get into your forecast as you listen to the voice prompts. You can dial them a little bit faster next time around. Weather.gov/Alaska is how you find us online. That's the entire statewide view. It will lead you to the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, or your 3 weather forecast offices that are serving your location, whether that's from Fairbanks, the Anchorage office, or the Juneau Weather Forecast office. All of those regions there are just a click away on the map. If you can't find what you're looking for, please feel free to email me anytime. I'm happy to help, and I would love to see pictures of where you're watching from tonight. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is how you find me. Here's a look at the FAA weather cameras. Just about every pilot I've talked to around Alaska knows and loves these cameras. So let's take a look at one that's a little bit fun to watch today, just a little bit out of the ordinary. You're saying, well, that's a radio antenna and a tower there and a little Quonset hut kind of thing, and town of Perryville. Hi folks, everybody in Perryville, how you doing today? But if you look a little bit more toward the north and west past all of Perryville, you can see a little bit of ash here. That's Veniaminoff, and the watch code went up a little bit today, so we're still tracking some of the rumblings and the ash from Veniaminoff, the volcano there very close to and northwest of Perryville. So watching curiously there with updates from the Alaska Volcano Observatory. So be sure and check that out anytime. Alaska AVO is a great resource anywhere in Alaska, but especially for our Alaska volcanoes. Now, looking out towards Savunga. Hello to everyone on St. Lawrence Island and Savunga and Gamble too. We'll go ahead and include Gamble tonight. Savunga, you're looking southward toward the mountains there. Attuck Mountain, I believe. If I said that wrong, I apologize, but hopefully I got that right. You're noticing a lot of the clouds building up on the other side of the mountains as you have a south breeze. It is cloudy, but a little bit drier on the north side, which is how we're looking at this view here from the camera looking southward around Savunga and the airport there. So pretty cool stuff. Anytime you want to check this out, make sure you head to abcams.faa.gov, and you can check out the cameras all around Alaska. If you haven't looked lately, the website's changed a little bit, but it is just as useful as before, and I think maybe a little bit easier to use too. So check it out. Here's a look at the satellite picture across the region. Low pressure is sitting on the southeast side of our map and the southwestern side of our map. Right in the middle is high pressure, and if you watch long enough, you know what I'm going to say about the jet stream pattern. We're in this omega block pattern right now, and it looks like an angry octopus. We have low pressure here, high pressure on the ridge, and low pressure right here across the eastern Gulf. In the middle is this very stable region. A lot of cloud cover is making its way through, but not a lot's happening underneath. The air is stable, and we're not getting a whole lot of vertical development there. We're not getting precipitation forming in any broad fashion right now. So what does that mean? That means that everything across south central and most of southwest is fairly dry. That drier weather is moving into southeastern Alaska, but the really active spot right now is right here across northern sections of Alaska. We're getting into more of a westerly flow. Storms are making their way out of the Arctic and working across the Chukchi Sea into northern Alaska. And this is where we're going to start to get into some snow again across the eastern Brooks Range. So if you're traveling there, if you're coming from there, you have people that are expected to arrive from there, they're still out there hunting, do expect that they're going to come back with a little bit of a tale about some snow. Probably nothing horribly significant, maybe 2 to 5 inches of snow, nothing really nasty as far as Alaska standards go. But around the Dalton Highway and east, once again, as we go into tonight and tomorrow, rain will change to snow, and we're expecting about 2 to 5 inches as we get through the daytime tomorrow. So plan on changing weather there in the eastern Brooks Range. Now, as we go through the rest of today, colder air is dropping southward. Out ahead of that, we do have some rainfall, but really most of Alaska tonight is under the control of this ridge of high pressure that extends from the North Pacific into southwestern Alaska and really into the eastern interior. The levels there around 1,030 millibars, give or take a little bit. It's a decent ridge. Low pressure sitting across the eastern Gulf at around 1,008 millibars. A little bit of rain across Hyder and parts of the Misty Fjords this afternoon, and also across the western chain and northwestern Alaska. All in all, things are pretty quiet around Alaska today. Low pressure will move eastward tonight, and as that cold front moves across the Brooks Range, expect northerly winds to move in. Now, we were talking about that with some of the ice. Looks like we're going to see that northerly wind at least through tonight and probably into tomorrow, as high pressure is still moving its way toward Point Barrow. That means any ice outside of the barrier islands will probably be pushed up to the barrier islands. On the northern side, though, most of that's probably not going to make its way through, according to the Alaska Sea Ice Program. Watch for showers across the Yukon Valley, rain, drizzle, and fog across the west coast, Norton Sound, and the Seward Peninsula. And then there's our low pressure system out west, guiding in more of a southerly flow for the central and western chain. But high pressure's in charge right here, and that means northerly winds are feeding into south central and most of southwest, and southeast will start to get into more of that drier weather as we get into your Thursday. You can see high pressures moving eastward a little bit more. Look at the snow forming up around the eastern Brooks Range. Areas of snow and poor visibility should be expected. You'll see that reflected in your flying weather charts here in just a little bit. Rain showers expected across the Yukon, all the way through the upper Yukon, middle Yukon Valley, into the AKwx Valley, the Tanana Valley, and probably wrapping up as we get into the Talkeetnas and the Copper River Valley. Most of south central and southwestern Alaska will be generally dry, but you can see some areas of light rain, maybe just drizzle across the southwestern Capes, St. Paul, St. George, the Alaska Peninsula. And then we get into some of the drier weather that's moving back into southeast. Tomorrow looks like a pretty nice day for most of southeastern Alaska, in fact. Low pressure is filling in here just south and west of Haida Gwaii, and that's helping to draw in that drier weather off the higher train and through most of the inside passages there. As we get into Friday, that low pressure system is going to wobble around just a little bit, and it might start to move some clouds and maybe some rainfall up. This is more of an extreme case, so if it does rain in southern parts of southeast, that probably won't be too much of a surprise. It's possible some of that will move as far north as Sitka and perhaps Petersburg and work its way up closer and closer to the capital city. But right now things look fairly dry for the northern half of southeastern Alaska for your Friday. Now things will be drying out up north as well. High pressure around 1,030 millibars stretches all the way across north and western Alaska for your Friday. Clouds should start to break up a little bit more than they have for the last couple days. That should make flying weather a little bit easier as well. The eastern passes, though, and eastern Alaska range especially, is going to see a little bit better chance for some rainfall and maybe some snowfall in higher terrain. Watch for showers across your western Alaska range passes. Areas of fog and drizzle should be expected, as usual, across most of the Bering Sea and probably on some of the northern coastlines of the Alaska Peninsula, all the way from Bristol Bay and Naknek, south and west as you head into the eastern Aleutians, including Nikolsky on Alaska and Dutch Harbor. Out west, another front's trying to work its way through the central and western chain. I don't think this is going to get very far, though, because we still have this wall of very stable weather that's just going to chip away at this leading edge of low pressure. It just doesn't have a whole lot of oomph or probably a lot of chance of making its way through. So that's a look at your Friday there. Let's take a look at temperatures as we get into early tomorrow morning. Of course, with colder air coming off the Arctic, we would expect temperatures to cool off. Lower 30s are expected across most of the North Slope and our villages there. Readings down below 30, 32 degrees. Don't be surprised if you get a decent freeze out of that. Lower to mid 40s for most of the middle and upper Tanana Valley, 39 around Eagle, 40 around Northway. As you get into the middle Yukon Valley, temps start to warm up a little bit more back in the mid to upper 40s. Bristol Bay temperatures closing in on 50 degrees around Dillingham. Southeast upper 40s and lower 50s for you. Prince William Sound in the mid 40s. About the same for Cook Inlet, maybe a little bit milder. 47 around Kodiak. St. Paul and St. George just shy of 50 degrees and low to mid 50s for most of the Aleutians. Remember, to the west you go and you get into that more of that southerly flow. High temperatures for your Thursday afternoon. A little bit of a dry day again continuing for most of south central and southwest. Should easily push temperatures into the upper 50s and low 60s. Mid 60s very possible for southeast with a dry day for you. Up north, mid to upper 30s for most of the daytime. Mid 50s around Nome and most of south and western Alaska. Overnight low temperatures are going to get even colder up around the higher terrain of the Brooks Range. Mid to upper 20s. Below freezing for the Beaufort Seacoast, lower to mid 30s for most of the Chukchi Coast, 30s and 40s as you get into the southern interior, 40s for most of southwest and south central Alaska, 40s and 50s for southeast. High temperatures for your Friday afternoon, well, they warm up a little bit up north, 40s and 50s there, mid-50s around Fairbanks in the middle Tanana Valley, pushing 60 degrees around Galena and the Koyukuk Valley, south and west, mid to upper 50s, 62 around King Salmon, southeast, upper 50s and lower 60s, cooler still, and lower 60s for most of south central Prince William Sound and Cordova, right around 64.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to aviation weather now. MVFR conditions are expected across a broad part of the interior, the west coast, the north slope, and certainly the Bering Sea, the Alaska Peninsula, and the chain. Places that will have lesser of a chance of that occurring, including a little bit of morning fog, but probably not all the way to IFR conditions. We're expecting mainly VFR across south central, a large part of the Copper River Valley, Kodiak Island, and the interior of Bristol Bay. You'll get back into MVFR as we get into southern parts of southeast with IFR out over the Gulf. Also looking for IFR conditions to start up across the upper Yukon and the upper Tanana, and parts of the Beaufort Seacoast there as that frontal boundary is dropping southward and lingering across some parts of the interior. Also expecting widespread IFR across the St. Matthew Island region eastward toward Etolan Strait and Nunivak Island, and back through the central chain and St. Paul and St. George. By Thursday afternoon, we expect improvement across many areas in the Yukon Valley, northward toward the Brooks Range, the south-facing slopes especially. But some of that colder, wetter air coming off the ocean that's moving in from the north will linger here across the coastal plain. You're going to see MVFR because of that, and in some cases north of Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, you'll likely see IFR conditions there lasting through a good chunk of the day. Notice improvements here across southeast all the way around the Horn to Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula down toward Kodiak Island, and once again some of the southwestern capes will stay at VFR through the afternoon, but just west of that from Nunivak Island to St. Paul, St. George, all the way into the Aleutians, you're looking at fairly widespread IFR conditions through most of the day. As you get into the upper Kuskokwim, just outside of that really into Denali, in the McKinley View area, you're expecting to see IFR conditions for Thursday afternoon. That shifts eastward a little bit more for Friday afternoon. Drier air starting to leave the northern Gulf and allowing MVFR conditions to develop around the Copper River Basin there. As you get into southern and central parts of southeast, MVFR to IFR conditions for your Friday morning. MVFR fairly widespread across the coastal plain again, especially the Beaufort Seacoast and just west of Point Barrow. IFR expected across a large part of the Bering Sea and through the central and eastern chain into the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula. That improves again for Friday afternoon with widespread VFR through most of the mainland. So Friday afternoon is looking pretty good just about any direction. Some exceptions will be, looks like Isabel Pass, maybe out toward Windy Pass, and Mentasta Pass, Tanita Pass looking pretty good right there. But as you look out to the west, IFR conditions continue for the central and eastern chain, and we're looking at hit and miss MVFR across some parts of the central and northern parts of southeast now for Friday afternoon. Here's your pass conditions in detail for tomorrow. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass, as you saw, should be listed at IFR throughout the day. On the other hand, Lake Clark and Merrill Pass look pretty good. VFR there. Rainy Pass likely leans over toward IFR later on in the day, and we'll see similar conditions for Windy Pass. Isabel Pass probably hovering close to MVFR. Mentasta Pass, a marginal day on Thursday, as you saw, VFR probably as we get into your Friday. Tanita Pass looking at MVFR. And Portage Pass also expected to be visual flight rule throughout the day. Chilkoot and White Pass, pretty good, but the further south you go, conditions should lower and worsen. Freezing levels show us that cold air is banked up across the Brooks Range and up north, but there is plenty of warmth to be had across the central and southern parts of the viewing area. As you get into southwestern Alaska, that gradient tightens up a little bit more, 6, 8 to 10,000 feet as you head down toward Lake Iliamna, a little bit further south toward Sand Point, 12,000 foot line, and the 6 to 8,000 foot freezing levels hovering right over southeast. Icing potential is pretty limited, and most of it's pretty high up there. Up north along the north slope, you're talking about levels around 8,000 feet. That quickly climbs to 9 and even 10,000 feet out across Prince William Sound in the northern Gulf, and most of the isolated moderate icing potential is across the eastern third of mainland Alaska. When we look at the jet stream, we can see why. Colder air is dropping southward with a ridge of high pressure. The angry octopus is back. This is our omega block, making that Greek letter-shaped omega. This is a blocking pattern that will not move very quickly, so we're going to be trapped in this pattern for a little bit. Low pressure sitting across the Gulf, giving southerly winds for southeast, northerly winds for the west coast, and southerlies out across the western Bering. Underneath that at 9,000 feet, you can see a similar pattern. Northerlies for most of the mainland, keeping south central and southwest fairly dry. Warmer, wetter weather out across the west and offshore winds coming in for southeast at 3,000 feet. Fairly light winds, 10 to 20 knots there. Northerlies 10 to 20 knots across the mainland. The strongest winds out across the central chain between 20 and 40 knots. And that's where we'll expect to find some turbulence. Below 4,000 feet, there's some turbulence reaching considerable moderate, all the way from Kiska to Adak. And then once again from just east of Unalaska Dutch Harbor all the way out towards Sand Point or so. Also watch for a little bit of chop across the north slope, generally below 3,000 feet.
It used to be that you could only warn one person about a tornado after it had already blown down someone else's barn.
Now, on average, we're able to issue a tornado warning 15 minutes before the tornado's even there, and that wouldn't be happening without Doppler radar.
This NexRad system has reduced fatalities on the order of 45% due to tornadoes since its advent.
We have a lot more information now about storms and being able to understand how they develop, how they produce severe weather, and how that information might be used to improve warnings for our National Weather Service partners.
The lab is unique in that we serve the nation by supporting the National Weather Service in its mission to protect lives and safe property by improving the accuracy and the lead time of severe weather warnings.
We have a legacy of radar research and converting existing technology from military to weather purposes.
A recycled Doppler radar led to the development of NexRad, installed nationwide in the early 90s. It allowed forecasters to see storms like never before.
Not only did we help bring that technology to the National Weather Service and to help protect lives and property, but we have continued to upgrade that technology, keep it relevant, and keep it state-of-the-art.
Recently, a major upgrade was added. Dual polarization technology takes the radar from 2D to 3D. Forecasters now know more about what type of precipitation is falling, which is very helpful during winter storms, as well as how much rain is accumulating, resulting in better flash flood warnings. The radar can also detect and track tornadoes based on debris. Looking to the future, the National Severe Storms Lab is testing the capabilities of phased array radar. Originally used by the U.S. Navy, the antenna scans the skies electronically rather than mechanically, allowing the radar to focus on a storm.
With current technology, we get a full picture or image of what is going on within a storm every 4 to 5 minutes. So it's more like a snapshot. Whereas with phased array radar, we get that picture of what's going on in the storm every minute. So it becomes more like watching a movie. So we can do adaptive, rapid scanning on the storms that matter most, being able to provide the information that's most relevant when and where it's happening.
Another advantage of phased array radar is its multifunction capability, providing weather and air traffic information simultaneously.
Number one, it is a system that promises to replace and expand upon the existing weather surveillance radars. Secondly, to replace aging air traffic surveillance radars. And number three, it offers a potential application to meet Department of Homeland Security and defense requirements for identifying and tracking non-cooperative aircraft. With the replacement of all these various radars with a single system, the American taxpayer could realize substantial savings in cost.
You have a lot fewer radars to maintain, and the electronic capability of this also reduces maintenance costs because you do not have moving parts.
Not too long ago, the ability to predict severe weather was thought to be impossible. During the past several decades, research conducted at the National Severe Storms Lab has developed life-saving tools like Doppler radar. We've progressed from no warning of threatening weather to about a 15-minute lead time, And current research promises to extend that much further.
Our knowledge of severe storms and how they behave, and our use and ability to use the Doppler radar technology is in a lot of cases a direct result of that close working relationship, that research to operations component that we get between the National Severe Storms Laboratory and a forecast office.
That history and understanding of how these data can be used by our users and doing the research to help advance the use of radar technology, really it's what we live for, it's in our lifeblood, it's in our history.
It's now easier than ever to be a part of weather research. We just launched the mPing app for both iPhone and Android users, and it's totally free. PING, which stands for Precipitation Identification Near the Ground, is a research project by the NOAA National Severe Storms Lab and the University of Oklahoma. With the mobile app, you can send us your weather observations on the go. Are snowflakes falling on your head? Is hail hitting your car? Just select what type of precipitation is falling and press submit. It's that easy. It takes about 5 seconds and it's anonymous. Reports can then be viewed online. Our scientists will compare your report with what the radar has detected. This helps us develop new radar technologies and techniques. Download the app today, share your reports, and let's work together to make our nation weather ready. Learn more here and follow us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now time for another look at your marine weather as well as sea ice. And today's update from the Alaska Sea Ice Program doesn't have a whole lot of changes here to that main pack ice, the multi-year ice that's hovering offshore of the Beaufort Seacoast. But one thing we do know is westerly winds will be coming in behind the front as it sweeps through tonight and tomorrow. And any ice that's sitting north of the Barrier Islands will likely move southward toward the Barrier Islands, and a little bit of that might sneak its way through. Not a lot, but just enough that you notice. And that may be a little bit more evident here east of Kaktovik and closer to Kaktovik, but also north of Dead Horse there. So the blue areas, of course, marginal ice, areas where concentration of ice is at or below 80% to about 20%. And some of the thicker ice could be on the move again with a stronger northerly flow. But then we'll get back into westerlies, and of course another wave of weather will move through. For the very latest ice information, make sure you check out weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at the weather in southeast now. Northwesterlies coming down the inside passage, strongest of which will be up around the Lynn Canal, 20 knots with 4-foot seas there, but those winds quickly diminish as you move southward. 5 to 10 knots, 2-foot seas on the inside, about 4 to 5-foot seas across the outer coast, looking at 10-knot winds for the most part, blowing onshore into Cross Sound and the Dixon Entrance. A little bit more of a northeasterly flow, though, around Craig and Klawock with 10 knots and 4-foot seas there as well. By Friday, generally light winds, but they're all picking up throughout the day, about 10 to 15 knots most areas. A few places like the Lynn Canal and the Cross Sound region will be looking at 20-knot winds from the north and the east. An offshore flow all the way up toward Cape Yakataga. South and easterly flow inside of the Dixon Entrance and the Clarence Strait, 15 to 20 knots there with 3 to 6-foot seas on the southern end. For south central, northerlies working through Cook Inlet, 10 knots there, very small seas inside of Prince William Sound, about the same, 3 to 5-foot seas as you move down past Resurrection Bay, and then you get into the Barren Islands, and western northwesterlies are expected, 25 to 30 knots there with 5 to 8-foot seas by Friday. More uniform north and easterly flow blowing off the mainland, anywhere from 10 to 15 knots most cases, but Cook Inlet, the winds are going to be a little bit stronger here as the low pressure system moves through. 20 to 25 knots expected with seas coming up to 7 and even 8 feet generally west of the Barrens and all the way up Cook Inlet. So plan for changes on Friday. For Thursday, northwesterlies moving across Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 20 knots in all areas. Some stronger gusts around Shelikof Strait. Don't be surprised to see winds up around 20 knots there as well. Northwesterlies all the way down the Alaska Peninsula, 3 to 5 foot seas expected. 20 to 25 knot winds across the region on Friday. 25 knots inside of Shelikof Strait. 6 foot seas on the eastern side. 7 foot seas though in the strait itself. 4 foot seas around the Bristol Bay region and down the coast. That northerly wind continues at 20 knots with 25 knots and 6 foot seas across the Pacific coastline for Friday. For the Aleutians, look for a south and easterly flow. Remember, we've got high pressure to your east and low pressure to your west. That's drawing up a decent south and easterly flow across the central and western chain, and the seas will be the highest from Atka all the way out toward Kiska as a result. 10 to 11 foot seas there, and south and westerlies moving across the eastern chain, not as strong. Looking for about 15 to 20 there with 5 to 7 foot seas. As we get into Friday, that stronger south and easterly flow will still be pushing right up toward Adak and Atka. 7 to 9 foot seas expected there. A little bit more of a variable wind as you get under the ridge from Unalaska out toward Nikolsky, but then back into that southeasterly return flow. 10 to 20 knots with 6 to 8 foot seas for your Friday in the west. For the west coast, light winds generally under the ridge of high pressure here, so the winds might be a little more variable in this region, and you're looking at generally smaller seas, 2 to 5 foot seas there. A southwesterly flow for St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George, about 10 to 15 knots and 4 to 5 foot seas. Light northerlies inside of Norton Sound and south of St. Lawrence Island. Not a big change there for your Friday at all. A stronger northerly flow south of Etolan Strait and the Kuskokwim Delta. Northeasterlies blowing into St. Paul and St. George, but again, some of that could be a little more variable with time. Otherwise, small seas, 2 to 3 feet in most cases. Up north, northerly winds behind the front, 15 to 25, 4 to 5 foot seas expected there. The Chukchi, lighter winds, northeasterlies, about 4 to 5 foot seas tops. A southerly flow returns on Friday. You can see that working its way into the Beaufort Seacoast. Light winds around Kaktovik. Otherwise, 2 to 4 foot seas in most areas for your Friday. Now, recapping tonight's weather, cold air is dropping southward once again. This could leave some snow across the eastern Brooks Range as we go through tonight and tomorrow. The rain will transition to snow, and 2 to 5 inches of snow is possible, especially east of the Dalton Highway. West, you're looking at maybe about 2 inches or so. This will move through fairly quickly, spreading clouds and showers across the eastern interior and the eastern Alaska Range. Dry weather tomorrow for most of southeast and most of south central as well, and gustier conditions develop on Friday in south central as we go throughout your afternoon. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.